There's a fundamental reality about human existence that most of us spend tremendous energy trying to deny. Suffering is not optional. It's not something that happens to unlucky people or those who make wrong choices. It's woven into the fabric of being alive. You will lose people you love. You will face disappointment, failure, illness, grief, and eventually your own death. This isn't pessimism. It's simply the truth. Viktor Frankl understood this truth more intimately than most. As a prisoner in Nazi concentration camps, including Auschwitz, he witnessed and experienced suffering at its most extreme. He watched fellow prisoners die from starvation, disease, brutality, and gas chambers. He lost his pregnant wife, his parents, his brother, and most of his extended family. He was stripped of every possession, every dignity, reduced to a number tattooed on his arm. And yet, from this hell, he emerged with an insight that would revolutionize psychology and offer hope to millions. While we cannot always choose our circumstances, we can always choose how we respond to them. Most of us operate under an implicit assumption that contradicts everything Frankl learned. We believe, deep down, that life should be fair, that if we work hard enough, make good choices, and are decent people, we should be able to avoid significant suffering. We see suffering as an aberration, a problem to be solved, a sign that something has gone wrong. And when suffering inevitably arrives, we're not just dealing with the pain itself, we're also dealing with the outrage and confusion that it happened at all. Why me? What did I do to deserve this? This isn't how it's supposed to be. This mindset adds a second layer of suffering on top of the first. The original pain is bad enough, but our resistance to it, our belief that it shouldn't be happening, our constant question of why me. This creates additional anguish that can be even worse than the original suffering. It's the difference between experiencing physical pain and experiencing physical pain while constantly telling yourself, this is terrible, I can't stand this, it shouldn't be happening, something must be terribly wrong. The second version is exponentially more unbearable. Frankl observed something remarkable in the camps. The prisoners who survived longest weren't necessarily the physically strongest or the youngest. Some robust men gave up and died quickly, while some frail individuals found ways to endure. The critical difference was meaning. Those who had a compelling reason to survive, a loved one waiting for them, an important task to complete, a testimony to bear about what happened, these people found reserves of strength that defied physical explanation. Those who lost their sense of meaning, who could see no reason to continue, often died soon after, even if their bodies were still capable of survival. This wasn't about positive thinking or self-deception. The prisoners who survived weren't telling themselves everything was fine or that the camps weren't really that bad. They were under no illusions about their situation. What they had was something more profound, a reason to endure, a why that made the how bearable. Frankl often quoted Nietzsche, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." In the camps, this wasn't philosophy, it was empirical observation, tested in the most extreme conditions imaginable. Think about your own experiences of suffering. The times when pain was most unbearable weren't necessarily when it was most intense physically. They were the times when it felt meaningless, pointless, when you couldn't see any reason for it or any purpose in enduring it. Conversely, you've probably endured significant hardship relatively well when you believed it was for something important, training for a goal, caring for a loved one, pursuing something you valued deeply. The suffering was the same or even greater, but your relationship to it was completely different. This is Frankl's central insight. We cannot always control what happens to us, but we retain the freedom to choose our attitude toward what happens. This freedom, he argued, is the last of human freedoms, the one that cannot be taken away. In the concentration camps, the Nazis controlled everything. What prisoners ate, where they slept, whether they lived or died. But Frankl noticed that they could not control how prisoners responded internally to their circumstances. Some became bitter, brutal, giving up their humanity. Others maintained dignity, helped fellow prisoners, refused to become like their oppressors. The external circumstances were identical. The internal response was freely chosen. Most of us never face anything approaching concentration camp conditions, Yet we often surrender this fundamental freedom without even realizing it. We allow our circumstances to entirely dictate our internal state. If things go well, we're happy. If things go poorly, we're miserable. We've handed complete control of our inner life to external events. We've forgotten that between stimulus and response, there's a space, and in that space lies our freedom to choose our response. This doesn't mean we should pretend suffering isn't real or shouldn't feel pain. Frankl wasn't advocating for stoic suppression of emotions or denial of legitimate suffering. He was pointing to something more nuanced, that our suffering changes fundamentally when we can find meaning in it. The pain may remain, but pain with meaning is qualitatively different from meaningless pain. A woman in labor experiences intense pain, perhaps the worst of her life, yet she doesn't experience it as meaningless suffering because it has a purpose, bringing her child into the world. A marathon runner experiences tremendous physical discomfort, but it's bearable because it's chosen purposeful, meaningful to them. The challenge is that not all suffering comes with obvious meaning attached. Your suffering isn't labor bringing new life. It's not a marathon you chose to run. It's a diagnosis you didn't ask for, a loss you didn't deserve, a situation you'd give anything to escape. Where's the meaning in that? This is where Frankl's insight becomes most profound and most challenging. When we cannot change our circumstances, we are challenged to change ourselves. The meaning isn't inherent in the suffering itself. The meaning is what we make of it, how we respond to it, who we become through it. This is simultaneously terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because it means we cannot blame our circumstances for our response. We cannot say, I had no choice but to become bitter, or anyone would be miserable in my situation. We always have a choice, even if it's only the choice of our attitude. Liberating because it means that no situation, no matter how dire, is without the possibility of meaningful response. Even when everything has been taken from us, we still possess the freedom to choose what our suffering will mean. In the next chapter, we'll explore exactly how to find or create this meaning in the face of unavoidable suffering, not as abstract philosophy, but as concrete practices that can transform your relationship with life's inevitable pain. If this perspective resonates with you and you want to explore these life-changing ideas more deeply, subscribe to the channel. Understanding how to find meaning in suffering isn't just philosophy. It's a practical skill that can transform how you experience your entire life. Viktor Frankl didn't leave us with just philosophy. He provided a practical framework for finding meaning, even in suffering. He identified 3 primary pathways through which human beings discover or create meaning in their lives, and understanding these pathways can fundamentally change how you experience difficulty. These aren't theoretical concepts. They're survival strategies tested in the most extreme conditions and refined through decades of clinical practice, helping people navigate their darkest moments. The first pathway is through creative work or accomplishment, through bringing something into existence or making a contribution to the world. This is the meaning we find in our projects, our careers, our efforts to build or create or solve problems. It's the satisfaction of looking at something and saying, I made that, or I helped with that, or that exists because of my effort. Most people intuitively understand this pathway. We feel good when we accomplish something meaningful, when our work contributes to something beyond ourselves. But here's what most people miss. This pathway to meaning doesn't require grand achievements or world-changing inventions. Frankl saw people find profound meaning in the smallest contributions. A prisoner who shared his last piece of bread found meaning in that act of generosity. A person who maintained dignity and kindness in impossible circumstances created something valuable, a testimony to human spirit that inspired others. The critical insight is that you don't need to wait for the perfect circumstances or the ideal project to access this pathway. You can find it in whatever situation you're currently in by asking, what can I contribute here? What can I create or build or give, even in small ways? If you're caring for an ill family member, your contribution is your care and presence. If you're in a job you find unfulfilling, your contribution might be the excellence and integrity you bring to it, or the way you treat colleagues, or the service you provide to customers. The meaning isn't in the task itself being inherently meaningful. It's in your decision to approach it as an opportunity for contribution rather than just an obligation to endure. The second pathway is through experiencing something or encountering someone, through love, through beauty, through deep connection with another person or with nature or art or truth. This is the meaning that comes not from doing, but from being fully present to life as it unfolds. Frankl wrote beautifully about moments in the concentration camp when he would see a sunset through the barracks window or remember his wife's face, and in those moments find something transcendent, something that made existence worthwhile despite everything. This wasn't escapism or denial. It was the recognition that even in hell, beauty and love existed and mattered. Even more remarkably, even after he learned his wife had died in the camps, the love he felt for her continued to give his life meaning. The person we love can give our life meaning even in their absence, even after death, because love isn't dependent on the physical presence of the beloved. It's a state of our own being, a capacity we develop and express. In our contemporary world, we've largely forgotten how to access this pathway to meaning. We're so busy doing, achieving, consuming, distracted by screens and notifications, that we've lost the capacity for deep experience. We visit beautiful places but spend the time taking photos for social media rather than actually seeing. We're with people we care about, but mentally elsewhere, planning, worrying, scrolling. We've become tourists in our own lives, checking boxes and collecting experiences without actually experiencing them. The practice here is simple but profound: presence. Can you be fully here, fully attentive to this sunset, this conversation, this meal, this moment? Can you love fully, not holding back because you're afraid of loss? Can you open yourself to beauty, to connection, to awe? This pathway requires vulnerability because being fully present means feeling everything, including pain. But it's precisely this willingness to feel deeply that makes life meaningful. The third pathway, and perhaps the most profound, is the one most relevant to the question of suffering. Frankl called it attitudinal values, the meaning we create through the stance we take toward unavoidable suffering. When we can no longer change a situation, when all other pathways seem blocked, we still retain the freedom to choose our attitude toward what's happening. This isn't about putting on a happy face or pretending things are fine when they're not. It's about something much deeper: the recognition that our response to suffering is where our deepest humanity is revealed and expressed. How you bear your suffering, what you make of it, who you become through it, the testimony you offer through your attitude. This creates meaning that can be more profound than anything you might accomplish in favorable circumstances. Frankl saw this repeatedly in the camps. Two people facing identical horrific circumstances would respond entirely differently. One would become bitter, brutal, giving up their humanity in the struggle to survive. Another would maintain dignity, share their meager bread with others, offer words of comfort, refuse to become like their oppressors. The circumstances didn't determine the response, the person did. And in that choice of response, in that decision about what their suffering would mean, they created something that nothing could take away from them. They demonstrated that the human spirit could transcend the worst circumstances, that dignity and meaning were possible even when everything else had been stripped away. This is the pathway most available in times of deep suffering. When illness strikes, when loss occurs, when circumstances seem unbearable, you can still ask, how will I carry this? What will I make of this experience? Who will I become through this challenge? Will I allow this to make me bitter, or will I somehow let it deepen me, open me, teach me something essential about being human? These aren't easy questions, and there's no judgment if you can't access this perspective immediately. Suffering is suffering, and some days just surviving it is enough. But over time, as you move through unavoidable pain, this question becomes available. What meaning can I create from this? How can I bear witness to what matters most to me, even in these circumstances? Can I suffer in a way that honors something important? Love, dignity, courage, truth? The beauty of Frankl's framework is that it's always accessible. If one pathway is temporarily blocked, others remain open. If you can't accomplish much because you're ill or caregiving or in difficult circumstances, you can still love, still experience beauty, still choose your attitude. If you're isolated or alone, you can still contribute through your work or your attitude toward your situation. There's always a pathway to meaning available if you're willing to look for it and choose it. The suffering may be unavoidable, but meaninglessness is optional. In our final chapter, we'll explore how living from this understanding transforms not just how you experience suffering, but how you approach your entire existence, turning potential despair into profound purpose. If these ideas are changing how you see your own life and struggles, subscribe to the channel. We're exploring the most important questions humans can ask, and this journey is just beginning. Understanding Frankl's philosophy intellectually is one thing. Living it, especially when you're in the depths of real suffering, is entirely different. The gap between knowing that meaning makes suffering bearable and actually finding that meaning when you're drowning in pain can feel impossibly wide. Yet this is where Frankl's insights become most practical, most urgent, most capable of changing not just how you think, but how you live. The transformation begins with a single recognition. Suffering without meaning is unbearable, but suffering with meaning changes its nature entirely. The pain may remain the same in intensity, but your relationship to it shifts fundamentally. Think of a person training for a marathon. The physical discomfort during training runs can be intense, the exhaustion real, the temptation to quit strong. Yet they continue because the suffering has context, purpose, meaning. It's taking them somewhere they want to go. Now imagine experiencing that exact same physical discomfort, but with no idea why. No end in sight. No purpose. The experience will be torture. The suffering is identical, but the presence or absence of meaning makes all the difference between something bearable and something that breaks you. This is why Frankl insisted that the primary question isn't how to avoid suffering. That's impossible. But how to suffer well. And suffering well means suffering meaningfully. It means transforming what could be pure tragedy into something that, while still painful, carries purpose, dignity, even a strange kind of beauty. This isn't about romanticizing pain or pretending it's somehow good. Suffering is not good, but it can be made meaningful. And that meaning is what makes it survivable. So how do you actually do this when you're facing real pain? When you've received a devastating diagnosis, when someone you love has died, when your life has fallen apart in ways you never imagined. The first step is the hardest. You must stop asking, why me? And start asking, what now? The question, why me, is a dead end. It has no good answer. It keeps you stuck in outrage and injustice, in the belief that this shouldn't be happening, that there's been some cosmic mistake. And while that's a natural response, staying there adds unnecessary suffering to unavoidable pain. The question, what now, is different. It acknowledges reality as it is and asks how you'll respond. It's a question that opens possibilities rather than closing them. It returns agency to you rather than leaving you as a passive victim of circumstances. The second step is to identify what matters most to you and use that as your North Star through the suffering. When Frankl was in the camps, thinking of his wife gave him reason to endure. He imagined reuniting with her, and that future possibility made the present bearable. It didn't matter that he was starving, freezing, surrounded by death. He had something to live for, something that made survival meaningful. Later, when he realized she had died, the meaning didn't disappear, it transformed. His love for her remained, and honoring that love by surviving, by bearing witness to what happened, by helping others, that became his meaning. The specific form changed, but the deeper purpose persisted. For you, this might mean recognizing that your children need you, so enduring becomes an act of love for them. It might mean that your work isn't finished, that you have something still to contribute. It might mean that your suffering can become a testimony, that by how you bear it, you offer something valuable to others who will face their own darkness. It doesn't matter what the specific meaning is. What matters is that you identify it and hold on to it like a lifeline. The third step is to recognize that your freedom lies not in your circumstances, but in your response. This is Frankl's most radical and most liberating insight. You may not be able to change what's happening to you, but you remain free to choose what it means and how you'll face it. Will you allow this to make you bitter, hard, closed? Or will you somehow, impossibly, Let it break you open in a way that deepens your humanity? Will you survive in a way that diminishes you, or in a way that, despite everything, enlarges you? These choices are always available, even when everything else has been taken away. This doesn't mean you won't have bad days, that you won't feel despair or rage or wish desperately that things were different. You're human, not a saint. But beneath those natural reactions, you can maintain a deeper choice about who you're becoming through this experience. You can suffer in a way that honors what you value most, that maintains your dignity, that refuses to let circumstances have the final word about who you are. What Frankl discovered, and what countless people have since confirmed, is that when you find meaning in your suffering, something almost miraculous happens. The suffering doesn't disappear, but becomes bearable. More than bearable, it becomes transformative. You discover strengths you didn't know you had. You develop compassion that only shared suffering can teach. You gain perspective on what truly matters versus what's trivial. You become, in a real sense, more fully human. Not despite the suffering, but through it, because of how you chose to meet it. This is why Frankl could say, incredibly, that he wouldn't want to undo his experience in the concentration camps, despite the horror, despite losing nearly everyone he loved. Not because the experience was good, it was evil, but because of who he became through it, because of the insights he gained that he could share with millions, because of the meaning he was able to create from ultimate meaninglessness. He transformed the worst thing that happened to him into a gift to humanity. That's the ultimate example of what's possible when suffering is met with the determination to make it meaningful. You don't have to reach that level of transformation, but you can move in that direction, one day at a time, one choice at a time. You can ask, when you wake up facing another difficult day, how can I bear this in a way that honors what matters most to me? You can look for small opportunities to give, to love, to maintain dignity, to choose your attitude, even when you can't choose your circumstances. And slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, you'll discover that what seemed unbearable has become something you're bearing. Not easily, not without pain, but meaningfully. And that makes all the difference. Suffering is inevitable. That's the hard truth. But meaning makes it bearable. That's the hope. And between those two truths lies the space where you build a life worth living. Even when, especially when, that life includes unavoidable pain. This is Frankl's legacy. Not the elimination of suffering, but its transformation through meaning. And that transformation is always available to you, no matter what you're facing. The question isn't whether you'll suffer. You will. The question is, what will you make of that suffering? How will you carry it? Who will you become through it? Those questions, and your answers to them, will determine not just whether you survive your suffering, but whether you transform it into something that deepens rather than diminishes your humanity.